Hello, hello, hello. You know what today is. How y'all doing? Happy Halloween. Okay, so here's what's going to happen today. I do plan to do an all-day Halloween stream, and that will happen. It will happen very soon, in fact. But first, I have a topic that's fresh in my brain. So I was going to save it for tomorrow, but I want to get it out today while it's all fresh. So this is really just me kind of journaling on this topic for half an hour or so. Then I'm going to stop this stream, restart a new stream, and keep it going for the rest of the day. And that will be our all-day Halloween stream. So this stream won't have a panel attached, but it also will not go for very long. It's just a way for me to get this topic down on video. And the topic is something that came out of a discussion with me and Dolbez yesterday about the different types of capital that humans kind of leverage for success, achievement, to meet their goals, etc. Hey, Kitty. Wow. Good to see you. Yeah, I mean, people may show up to chat, but capital. Well, I'm going to talk about that because I believe it's something I have too. And what this whole topic is, and kind of, Joe, our Nexus enterprise, what you said about wealth compounding, I'm trying to convert one form of capital into another form of capital, which is economic capital. So the three forms of capital we talked about with Dolbez yesterday were economic, which is money, finance, resources, whatever. So that category, that bucket of capital for me is empty. I started my business last year and I actually took on a bit of debt to do that. So right now my economic capital is, let's say the bucket is empty with maybe a hole in it. And so what I'm trying to do is take these other buckets of capital and somehow translate them into economic capital, or figure out where the failure to translate them into economic capital is. And there's going to be some risk management involved too. Snap-ital, I love it. I have plenty of Snap-ital. How can I translate that into capital, from Snap-ital to capital? In fact, Joe, you're wonderful. I think I'm going to steal that title from you right now. Give me 1 second. Hang on 1 second. Let me snatch Joe's idea real quick. From Snap-ital to capital. There we go. Okay, and I may ignore the comments while I do this because it's easy for me to focus. But you're going to get your cut, dude. You got to help us make money first. We got to start compounding the wealth. And you'll definitely get your cut from it. I remember Snapple. Hey, Kane. Good to see you. And happy Halloween, everybody. We're going to get that party started in probably less than an hour. All right. So here's where I'm going with this. So we talked about economic capital. Another form of capital is social capital, and there's several kinds. That's kind of your networking. I'll run through real quick what GPT gave me on social capital. Some of this is from the theory of Pierre Bourdieu. That's less important, I think, than the actual content itself. But there's three types of social capital that they identify. One is called bonding capital, and that's the connections you form, like the close connections. I call that community. That's what I'm trying to build here. Friend groups, family, people with similar identities or interests. It's the people you connect with and form like long-term bonds and relationships with. I feel like I do pretty well in that area. I have lifelong friends. I have very rich, deep friendships. My whole life, I've kept friends for decades and decades. I have a strong family tie. I don't know how strong their tie is on their end towards me, but I have a pretty robust family network. So I think my bonding social capital is okay. Then there's what's called bridging social capital, And it says this is the capital that involves connections across different social groups, networks, communities. So this is like the networking. This is where I take my little set of bonding capital or community or whatever and hook it up to other people's community. This is kind of like when we partner with other channels or I collaborate with other creators or other agencies outside of this channel. I'm looking for more of that bridging social capital. I don't think you can ever have too many of it. I don't think you can ever have too many people in your personal network, your support network, or your social network. So I am always looking for ways to bring in new bridging social capital. And in fact, the nexus that Joe and I are working on is kind of intended to be a form of bridging social capital. It's where people can take their network and their skill set and hook it up to our nexus, and then they get the benefit of all the other networks that are hooked up to that. So the nexus itself is kind of a node for people to build that bridging social capital on. And then there's what's called linking social capital. And this is the relationships you have with institutions or people in those institutions that have power and influence, government agencies, educational institutions, large organizations. My linking capital is pretty low. Other than I would say in Washington State, I have a little bit of it within the peer movement, the mental health movement. I'm kind of on the outs, and that's a whole other topic. There's something brewing there I'm going to talk about in a few episodes. But I've kind of played the political game here in Washington State as within the peer and the mental health movement, and so as a result of that, I have some of that linking capital, or I know where to link when I need to. So I think my social capital bucket is pretty okay now. I think I can leverage some of that into economic capital, although there are barriers, and that's what I want to talk about today because I think they lie in that third realm of social capital. That's what Dobes talked about the other day, and he said it's things like education, your taste, how much you know about culture. And in my day, in fact, there was a book that came out I think in the late '80s that was being passed around my kind of circle of academics and gifted people and college students. It was something like I don't know 100 something things or the 500 something things that all cultured Americans need to know, and it was things like Shakespeare and Homer and classical music, and so in certain circles, that's what you were expected to know to be considered to have cultural capital. And again, there's three types of cultural capital, so I want to break those down and kind of do an analysis of what my cultural capital bucket looks like. And I'm going to get even more granular than that in a second. The first is what they call embodied cultural capital. These are ingrained qualities, or ingrained, I'd say, are acquired, such as manners, accents, vocabulary, cultural knowledge. It's a form of cultural capital that's acquired through socialization and personal experience, like learning to appreciate classical music or rock music. I'd say Gen X. I'm loaded with Gen X cultural capital. When I'm with other Gen Xers, you can see that cultural capital flow, that common set of movie references, music references. We talked about the other day about all the candy we remember growing up, etc. That's all a form of cultural capital within that generation. So I have plenty of Gen X cultural capital. Also, when I was in junior high and high school, I went to that residential school for the gifted. It was a great books program, and so we did learn Shakespeare. We learned Plato. We learned classical music. We had an orchestra. We had a choir. We sang it. I acquired a lot of that. I guess what now would be called high culture. So I have a lot of high cultural capital. I've studied literature. I've studied philosophy at the university level. I have probably more high cultural capital than most Americans. I don't think high cultural capital translates into economic capital anymore, at least not in most of the circles that I've been in. In fact, I think it could sometimes be a liability. I talked one day about, I worked at this big call center in Vegas. It was the Citibank call center. So if you have a Citibank credit card or you call the number on the back, you get me. and we had like 6 weeks of training. It was a very intensive training program to train us to go on the floor and answer phones. And I actually did quite well at that job. I was moved up to this VIP credit card they have. They like hand-pick this little team to service the VIP credit cards, and I was picked for that. I had a lot of good reviews and everything. So whatever capital I was using in that environment was working for me because I was successful. But during training, we did this little ice break exercise, and we had to partner up with somebody in the class. And I partnered up with this lady. She was like middle-aged, kind of working class, just woman. She was nice. We got along. And we were supposed to answer this series of questions. And one of them was, what book is on your bedside table? And I happened to be reading a book at the time of Shakespearean criticism. And so I told her it was a book about Shakespeare. And this was her reaction. She had glasses. She's like the kind of glasses you wear on a chain. And she like took her glasses and she's like, "Oh, you're one of those people." I had no idea what that meant. Like, what is people that read Shakespeare? What is those people? And so that's an example to me of like where, like, I think this cultural capital is a good thing, but in mainstream America, it's received very differently than it's received in my little academic circle that I was used to hanging out with. Um, there's a different type of culture. I think some of my cultural capital works against me, and I think it has to do with my Cajun English, which is a legitimate form of English. I grew up speaking not American English, standard American English that most people speak, but the version we speak in South Louisiana is called Cajun English. I have an accent. I have an articulation disorder. I was in speech therapy. So I think there's things around those kind of cultural capital that might work against me in certain circles. I just don't talk right enough. I don't talk fancy enough. I don't have the polish. When I was first applying for peer jobs in Washington State, there was this peer at an agency that was interested in hiring me, and she was really excited to bring me on. And she was telling me, she's like, "You're going to do great here. All we need to do is polish you up a little bit." I was really insulted. I'm like, what needs to be polished? Exactly. Like, what about like I was like, it's my accent. It's my Louisiana way of talking. It's the ethnicity that I'm so proud of. In her mind, it was a liability, and it needed to be like modified. It was the code switching. It needed to be modified so that I could be more successful in this role. And I was thinking, as a peer supporter, that should have nothing to do with the actual work I do. So there is a strong bias or prejudice against, let's say, low cultural. I have a ton of high cultural capital. But if you have even just a little bit of low cultural capital, that can work against and undermine all of that high cultural capital. I've had friends that have from Louisiana that have gone off to fancy liberal colleges and have had to change their accents and code switch to the more American liberal way of doing things. This has been an issue not only for me but for Cajun people in general. And I have a lot of family members and friends that are very, very successful down in Louisiana. But I wonder if they went to some other state, if they would have the same level of success, because they would run into the same cultural barriers that I've run into. So I think my weaknesses in translating some of this cultural capital into economic capital comes from the low cultural capital I've acquired that I'm very proud of, and I have no intention of changing, just like I'm not changing the gay, I'm not changing the autism, I'm not changing my emotional intensity, I'm not changing any of that. So because of my refusal to adapt and code switch and my inability in most cases, I'm saddled with like a big negative cultural capital score in that one area that I think regardless, and that's a point I want to make, and I think this is where the woke kind of have a point with marginalization and stuff, and I've talked about it before. No matter how much merit you have, no matter how much intellectual cultural capital, how much learning, how much cultural knowledge you have, if you have even just I don't even think it takes a very large amount of this negative cultural capital. If you talk talk or act or come across as too poor, too black, too gay, too trans, too autistic, whatever, that is immediately going to negate all of the high. Like people talk about having to work harder as a woman, harder as a black person, harder as a gay or autistic person. It's to compensate for that negative impression that that form of cultural capital makes on people. And I think that that area is probably my biggest weakness when it comes to translating it to economic capital. And I'm 53 years old. I still haven't figured out how to overcome it. I rely on intelligent people to be able to contextualize and look past all that. They can't. They cannot. I don't know why. It's their problem, not mine, but I pay the price for it. The second type of cultural capital is called objectified. And these are, it says tangible. This is kind of like economic capital, I guess. It's cultural artifacts. It's paintings, it's books. I have shelves and shelves of books. Greek philosophy, I have pretty much all the Greek philosophers' tragedies. I have a collection of Plato. I have multiple translations of Aristotle. A whole shelf just of Shakespeare and entire Shakespearean criticism. A whole collection on Western culture and the Western intellectual tradition. I have the Romantics, Wordsworth, William Blake. I'm looking at it right now. Emerson, Walt Whitman, American literature, the Riverside Chaucer. It's all of Chaucer's collected works. I have a whole shelf of Cajun history. I have modern Nietzsche, look, Carl Jung, all of those cultural artifacts. It don't get me anywhere. Fashion, the material aspects of culture, that signal status or cultural capital, whatever. I dress very modest. I'm Gen Xer. I'm a slacker. I've been a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy my whole life. Shorts and t-shirt. I'm not fancy. I don't dress fancy. I don't intend to ever start dressing fancy. All of that could maybe work against me too, because the economic capital tends to be in cultures which use different cultural markers than that. And then the third type is institutionalized, and this is like formally recognized achievements. This is your college degree. This is my peer certification. This is the awards you received in high school. Believe it or not, I have a scrapbook back home. My mom has it, and it has several ribbons in there that I got for placing in public speaking. I was 4-H president. There was like events throughout the year where you went and competed. You'd give demonstrations on different 4-H topics, or you would give public speeches. I had speech in high school. I was part of the speech team. I was actually awarded for my public speaking, and to this day, that's the thing that works against me the most, is the way I talk and my voice. I'm a voice cell, so. When I'm trying to figure out, I don't know how I get ribbons from it from some people, and then it's a barrier to being included in other cultures. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out today. So one of the tools I've been using to try to figure it out is kind of this innate cultural this embodied cultural capital, which a lot of it to me comes down to personality and personality traits. I would say if there's one thing that works against me outside of this cultural, low culture stuff, in Cajun it's called bakla, which is low class. It's French for low class. I'm a coon ass. In fact, I found my shirt the other day. I'm going to wear it tomorrow. Look at this. Registered coon ass. And at the bottom it says, I ain't worrying about nothing. There's a big divide in Cajun culture between the fancy Cajun people that kind of change the way they talk and act to be upwardly mobile, and they're called the genteel Acadians. And then there's the Cajuns that call themselves coonasses, and we're very proud of this, and we identify this. I am a proud coonass. That is going to work against me when I'm trying to move into, be upwardly mobile and move into fancier circles. This does not fit in with that culture. So I would say outside of that stuff and the autism, the rocking, the hand motions, the snap-ital, as Joe calls it, outside of that, I think my personality is the number one factor working against me. A lot of people, most people just don't like me for some reason. Or they're threatened by me, or they see me as a risk or a liability, or they don't want their brand associated with me because it can reflect negatively on them. That is what keeps me out of opportunities more than anything else. And by opportunities, I mean when people like Joe and I are doing with the Nexus, we're trying to form a team and we're filtering in people and we're filtering out people. Now, I'm filtering in based on merit, based on strengths. I'm not filtering in based on how somebody talks, looks, cultural factors, none of that. It's strictly merit based. It's what you bring to the table. What do you have to offer that the rest of the team can draw on? That's it. And I think I bring plenty of that. But there's most people want something extra in addition to that. They, in addition to your strengths and your skills, they want you to be able to appear a certain way. That is what I do not bring. And I think for that reason, because of my strong personality, whatever, I want to look at this idea of cultural capital kind of like from a big five lens. And the big five, there's actually people that break it down into, well, the big five itself breaks it down into two subdomains. So each of the five traits has two domains. And so when I took my big five test, which you can Google, I did a whole stream on it, I took it live. They give you the score in each of the domains. So you end up with actually 10 scores of 10 different traits. And those domains can be broken down further into 6 facets. And what I want to do today is kind of introduce the 6 facets. So we're looking at 30 facets. I'll try to make this quick. And kind of where I fall in each of the facets, because a lot of them are strengths and some of them are liabilities. And what I want to do is kind of map this out, because I have in my head, I'm envisioning a tool that can help others where you kind of assess your different forms of capital and you assess your big five traits and you see where they intersect, so you can see kind of your points of weakness and your strengths. And the weaknesses, I think, is where the risk management comes in. That is the parts of your personality and your skill set that bring the most risk. So if you could figure out how to manage those parts of yourself, I want to see if that can modify my chances for success. So the first was is extroversion. I score very high in extroversion. And these are the facets. The first one is positive emotions, and it refers to an individual's propensity to experience positive emotional states such as laughter, joy, excitement, etc. Joie de vivre. As a Cajun, we're just loaded with this as a culture. If you go to Louisiana, you're just going to see this positive emotionality just flowing everywhere. The grocery store, the restaurants, on the street, etc. High scorers are joyful, enthusiastic, and optimistic. That is me. Low scorers are not necessarily unhappy, but they experience fewer episodes of emotional elation throughout their lives. Hence, they are not characterized by the same unbridled joy as those with the high scores. So I'm going to give myself a very high score in that trait. The next one is excitement seeking. An individual's yearning for stimulation and intense thrills. That's me. I crave stimulation. I thrive on challenge. If there's something wild and exciting there to do, throw it at me. I'm ready to do it. I crave high scores, crave excitement, and have a disposition for seeking out intense and varied sources of stimulation. This panel verse alone, for me, is excitement seeking. Low scores have less of a need for thrill seeking and may thrive in roles that would bore those with higher scores. So for that one, also, to give myself a high score, plus plus. Activity level. It's an individual's inclination to stay active at all times. I am what's called, they classified ADHD into primarily inattentive and primarily hyperactive. I'm on the hyperactive side. I have an enormous amount of energy. That's one reason I think I rock. It's like my body just going. High scorers are busy and entrepreneurial. They're typically engaged in several different projects all at once. I work my best when I have 4 or 5 things going on at the same time that I could switch between. I thrive off of a very high energy level. Low scorers are not necessarily less productive, but they prefer to take things at a slower pace and are better able to concentrate on one task at a time. So again, big high score there. These are all strengths to me, so that extroversion trait to me is a strength. But in some cultures, like up here in the Pacific Northwest, it is a liability. If you have even a slight bit of extroversion among the norm, this is a version of tall poppy, where if you're too high above the crowd, they try to tear you back down to the crowd's level instead of figuring out how to use your strength as their strength. And so my extroversion very much works against me here. They think I'm a mentally ill, crazy person when I try to start friendly conversation with strangers in public. Um, Assertiveness is your individual that's your tendency to speak up, affirm yourselves. I am so high in assertiveness. This is probably one of my highest traits. I have a big mouth. I'm not afraid to use it. I'm constantly telling people who I am, what my values are, where my boundaries are. High scorers have an easier time taking charge and speaking their minds. They tend to come across as natural leaders, but can seem forceful and overbearing. Again, a strength of my personality that I think is a negative in the wrong environment. So part of this is just finding the right environments where I can leverage this into success. Low scores, typically content to stand back and let others take center stage. So very, very high in this one. Gregariousness is an individual's desire to be surrounded by many different people all at once. Hi, what's the panel verse? What is this show? High scorers enjoy social gatherings and get a kick out of interacting with others. Low scorers tend to get overwhelmed by big get-togethers and shy away from large engagements, prefer more one-on-ones. So again, super, super high in this one. And the last one is warmth. It's an individual's propensity to display positive reactions towards others and the ease with which they form friendships and bonds. I'm very strong in this. I always have been. This is a Louisiana trait, a Cajun trait. We love people. If you go to Louisiana, you're going to be surrounded by people that are just wanting to get to know you and excited that you're there and everything. Low scores. People with low scores find it difficult to initiate contact with strangers. It doesn't mean that they're hostile, just that they're more reticent and subdued. They're more reserved when meeting people. One of my big complaints about the Seattle area is the complete lack of warmth. They're very polite. I wouldn't even necessarily say friendly, but they're polite. Like a stewardess would be polite, or somebody at Disneyland would be polite in the same way to everybody. There is zero warmth coming out of these people. They are the coldest. They hold their emotions so far inside that you don't even know that they have any. They're just like robots. It's like an android being polite but with no emotional warmth to it. That to me would be low warmth. Okay, that's the trait of extroversion. Let's get to agreeableness. The subfacet, trust. An individual's inclination to perceive others as fundamentally fair and honest. I am so high in trust, it works against me. My rule is I give people trust until I have reason not to. So I invest, I immediately when I meet a new person, unless I'm getting some red flags, I will invest a certain amount of automatic trust. Let's say I'll put in like $100 of trust from the start. I will invest that. And then I will take it back as I find a reason not to. Or as they signal more trust, I will add more in. But I'm willing to give a very high starting amount of trust to people. High scores typically assume that others are well-intentioned and trustworthy. You need a certain amount of that to keep society going, or at least community. So one thing I do here, we did a whole episodes. I did like 3 streams in a row on building trust. Low scores can be said to be more skeptical and suspicious, and they're a little more cautious. And high scores are just more good-hearted and charitable with people, like mentally charitable. I'm willing to give people a lot of like good faith and grace about things. Second trait is earnestness. It's an individual's basic stance toward deceiving others for personal gain. I have a really hard time with this. High scores are reluctant to connive or manipulate, although I can when I need to, like in board games and stuff. And they can be thought of as frank and sincere. I had a friend that told me one time that he finds me very guileless, like without guile, and that opens me up to getting taken advantage of. Transparency creates trust. I try to be as transparent as possible. I want to be the opposite of manipulative. I want to be so transparent that people trust me to not manipulate them and to just tell them things how they are and let them make the decisions for themselves. Low scores tend to believe that some degree of manipulation is necessary, and they're likely to come across as more calculating and shrewd. They're not necessarily amoral so much as they are guarded and restrained when it comes to divulging the truth. Like they'll hold things back. They'll like calculate what information they give you and they don't. So I think I am much higher in this earnestness. And although I think it's a strength because it builds trust, in many ways it can be a liability. Altruism is an individual's level of unselfish concern for others and their immediately willingness to help. I love to help. I help people all the time at a great cost to myself. I've been doing this stream for like over a year and a half now with the goal of helping others. And I've put so much of my sweat, my time into it. I've gotten almost nothing back from doing it, and I still am motivated to keep doing it because of this intrinsic drive to be helpful to something beyond just my own self. So I would say I am super high in this one as well. Wow, so far these personality scores are looking like strength after strength after strength. I wonder where the problem is. High scores experience caring for others as rewarding. I get a pleasure out of helping other people. If I can help, like as a teacher, when I help a student learn, when I can help people like take control of their mental health issues and start to make progress, I get so. I like paying taxes. I like being able to send super chats. I like being able to support people on Patreon. During COVID, when we got all that extra money, one of the things I did with it was like, oh, I can finally now support the creators that I've been benefiting from all this time. So I joined people's Patreons. I would do buy me a coffee. I would send them donations. I got so much joy out of doing that. My goal, when my economic bucket gets full enough, I'm going to set out a certain percentage of that each month just to contribute and donate and support other people. It's like my form of tithing. So I'm very high in this altruism. Low scores see requests for help as invasive, and they're more likely to let their support hinge on whether they get something out of it for themselves. I have people all the time that tell me that I do things for free, just naturally without knowing it, that some people get paid six figures to do. And why am I giving away all this stuff for free when I can monetize it? Because I don't even know what those things are, and I don't even know that there's a market that I could monetize it, because it just comes so natural for me to just give it, because it's so it costs me nothing to give this to people. All right, the next one, cooperation compliance. Aha, we might have hit our first roadblock here. An individual's tendency to avoid confrontation. This is what most people think of, I think, when they think of the trait of agreeableness. It's the ease with which they avoid confrontation and yield to others. High scores seek compromise or set aside their own needs with the aim of avoiding conflict. Low scores are more confrontational and can be thought of as more willing to use pressure or intimidation to get what they want. I don't so much use pressure and intimidation, but I don't back down. I don't bend and I don't yield very easily. So if we're going to collaborate, it's going to have to be on terms that allow me to bring everything I want to bring to the situation and not have to compromise any of that. Now, I can compromise when I need to, but I would say it's not my natural tendency, because I want a win-win for everybody. I don't want to have to lose so you can win, and I don't want you to have to lose so I can win. So my solutions are more focused on how can we all win. And as a result of that, if it comes to me having to take a little bit of an L, I have a strong resistance to that. So I'm going to put myself as low in that score. Modesty. Ha 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 ha. An individual's inclination to present themselves in a humble and unassuming manner. High scores are uncomfortable professing that they're superior to others. Low scores find it easy to profess their superiority and may sometimes be perceived as arrogant and authoritative. Yes. And this comes up a lot with the gifted conversation. Should we be using the word gifted? It makes other people feel bad. I am proud gifted. I went to a gifted school. It had gifted in the title. I am not disowning that part of myself. I didn't do it for gay or any of the other stuff. So if you feel bad because gifted people exist, that's your problem, and I feel zero sorrow for you whatsoever. You can cope and seethe. So yeah, I would say I'm pretty low modesty. I'm going to put that very low. And then sympathy and compassion. An individual's inclination to feel sympathy and compassion in dealing with others. High scores are empathetic and refrain from judging others harshly. I'm empathetic. In fact, I'm a hyper empath. and I judge very hard. I can empathize and judge harshly at the same time. Those with low scores have a more detached stance and think of themselves as more logical and discerning. Again, I'm both. I can be logical and empathetic at the same time. Low scores can be perceived as cynical, while high scores may come across as too kind-hearted for their own good. This one I think is mixed depending on who you ask, because some people find me one of the kindest, most sensitive souls they know, and other people find me an absolute monster. In fact, I had a friend that told me one day that he said, Jeff, you're one of the most kindest, warmest, caring people that I know, and an absolute monster to anyone that's not sensitive to that. And I said, yeah, I think that's right. I agree. That is correct. So this one I think is, I'm going to put balance because I think it depends on who you ask. So again, it's me finding the environments where my kindness and kind-heartedness or whatever, sympathy, compassion is valued, is perceived and valued, versus the one where the more cynical, kind of detached, logical monster side comes across. I'm a Satanist. I don't mind being seen as a monster. All right. I'm going to get through this, guys. Then we're going to celebrate Halloween. We got 3 more traits to go. Conscientiousness. The first one, self-assurance, an individual's sense of competence in pursuing their goals. High scores normally trust their skills and competence as well as their ability to maintain focus. Low scores are liable to experience a lack of agency and often doubt their own ability. I'm going to put this one high with a caveat. I have major imposter syndrome, so I never believe that what I'm doing is actually as good as people tell me it is. At the same time, I am confident in my ability to get shit done. I am a doer, not a dreamer. Put me with a bunch of other doers that can actualize plans. I am one of those people, and I'm confident of that. So I'm going to put my self-assurance at very high, with the qualifier of having imposter syndrome. Orderliness. This was the lowest score on my Big 5 test. I scored a 12 out of 100 in politeness. I scored an 8 out of 100 in orderliness. I do not like structure. I don't like routine. I don't like rules. They work against me. I have my own flow, and I need to be able to work how I naturally work. And order and structure does not come into. I can be very orderly and structured when I need to. I am super organized. I can help other people organize their lives just fine. It's not that I'm not organized. I'm just not structured. I don't need it. It's nothing but a hindrance to me. High scores are well organized and naturally inclined to apply system and structure to their pursuits. Low scores are more inclined to improvise their way through life and prefer to switch back and forth between different tasks and endeavors, like those 5 or 6 things going on at once that I can switch back and forth between randomly and spontaneously. There's no pattern or system to it. So I'm very low in orderliness, but I consider that a strength. If you put me in an orderly environment, I'm going to be less effective because I'm going to be fighting the structure. I'm going to spend like part of my bandwidth fighting the structure and part of it trying to get the job done despite the structure. If you put me in an environment with a lot of creative freedom, the world, like there's no, the world is the limit, or whatever the phrase is. So again, it's finding the right environments. Dutifulness is an individual's propensity to task and obligations as binding. High scores are committed to fulfilling their promises and duties, even when it's an opportunity for them to do so. This is that commitment Joe and I talked about. I'm super high in this. Low scores are liable to find rules and regulations confining and thus view obligations that are set before them as suggestive rather than mandatory. That is true about rules. Rules to me are suggestions. They're not like set in stone stuff that you have to do. It's like we recommend you do this thing and this is the best way to do it. But I can decide in the moment whether I need to actually follow the rule or not. But I don't see rules and regulations as the kind of obligation they're talking about. I see this more as commitment. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show up. When I say I'm going to show up, I'm going to do the thing I say I'm going to do. I don't feel like it's a burden or a hassle or an obligation. So to me, that's very high dutifulness. It's that commitment. The rules and regulations thing comes under orderliness more to me than dutifulness. So I'm going to put myself as very high. and dutifulness. Achievement striving refers to a person's level of ambition and willing to make sacrifices in pursuit of success. I think this stream is living proof that I have that. High scores are goal oriented and purposeful. One thing I do in my work is help people set goals. It's someone described to me once like having a goal versus not having a goal. You're out in the ocean and there's just water as far as you can see on all sides of you, all the way to the horizon. There's nothing to aim yourself toward. Versus if you see an island in the distance or a boat or something, then you have something to aim toward and the openness becomes less overwhelming and less like vague and purposelessness. So I always try to have something in the distance to aim for. So I'd say I'm very achievement striving. High scores are goal oriented and purposeful, but extremely high scores may be perceived as overly focused on work and compulsive in their need to seek. I don't think I suffer from the overly high. I think I have just enough of this high score. And then low scores are more laid back with regard to their goals and more inclined to do just enough work to get by without overexerting themselves. And I do that in some situations where it's not important, but mostly I try to put my all into things and give it. If my name's on something, I'm going to have it be the best quality product or service that I can give. Self-discipline is an individual's willingness to tolerate difficulties and boredom in the name of completing their task. I can already tell I'm very low in this. I'm very poor at discipline. Even stuff like sitting still, breathing, meditating, horrible at that. I have no self-discipline whatsoever. I can have it in small bursts when I need it, but this is definitely not a personality strength. Low scores are less tenacious and more inclined to procrastinate. Yes, I have perfected the art of procrastination. I've told stories of writing my papers and essays in the period before the period they were due on notebook paper and then ripping them out of my notebook and having the teacher pull it out when he gave back papers as an example of one of the best essays that were ever written. I can do very high quality work at the last minute. In fact, I probably work better under that pressure than if I took my time to do it. So it's a negative, but again, it can also be a strength because of that working under pressure element. Prudence is an individual's tendency to act only on the basis of prior considerations. High scores are cautious and deliberate and inclined to mull over every option and implication. Low scores are more spontaneous and less inclined to worry about making wrong decisions off the cuff. I would say I'm a low scorer here, except I can be cautious and deliberate about some decisions when I need. Like if I'm playing a game, like we played Monopoly. There were times where I took a lot of pause to really think through things. So there are contexts where I can be high score, but in general, I think I fall more on the low score side. So a lot of my personality weaknesses so far seem to come in the area of conscientiousness, but then a lot of my strengths, and I've said this before about my big five, that my conscientiousness is very split. I'm very high in some areas and I'm very low in other areas. So that's where I think you see the most differential between subfacet scores. All right, openness. Openness is interesting because I want to show this chart one more time. Okay, we talked about this developmental potential and these overexcitabilities that compose a lot of it. Emotional, imaginal, intellectual. We even have sensual, which I've said is the aesthetic. It could, in addition to actual physical senses, it could be things like beauty, art, like kind of mental things that are conveyed through the senses. Reading through this openness trait, it seems to cover almost every one of those excitabilities. I am super high in openness. The first one is fantasy, which is that imaginational overexcitability. It's an individual's propensity to perceive their surroundings through a lens of vivid mental association. High scores are imaginative and easily bored by the mundane world. I have a very high creative imagination, creative problem solving. They tend to abstract away from it through daydreaming and elaborate mental energy. where low scorers tend to focus on facts and things that actually exist around them. I would say the conspiratards around here are very high in this fantasy trait, and I think in some situations it can be a strength when it's paired with that logic and reason and focus. This one, I think, I know people that are a lot higher in the fantasy trait than I am, and I do tend to focus more on the concrete and realistic side of things, um, probably because of the autism. I'm like autistically obsessive about facts and reality. So for that reason, I'm gonna mark this one as kind of balanced. I am high in the creativity part, but I'm low in the sense that I prefer to focus on facts and concrete things. Aesthetic interest is the individual's ability to appreciate beauty, art. High scores are easily engrossed in experiences they find beautiful. I can be transported through music. It almost takes me to an altered state of consciousness. A really good movie, a good book, a good album, like some like rock music and all that. Those are form of active meditation for me. They actually take me to a different state of consciousness than my waking consciousness if I can immerse myself in it to the right degree. So very, very high in this one. Emotional denotes an individual's degree of preoccupation with the emotional lives of themselves and others. High scores regard feelings as a central part of human existence and dedicate much of their time to their emotions. Low scores are less immersed in the emotional domain and liable to regard their feelings as inconvenient or irrational occurrences that occur or should not be allowed to dominate. Oh my God, what do we have here? But the very divide that has showed up on this stream over and over and over between high emotional orientation and low emotional orientation. Passion, high passion, low passion. I'm going to put extra, extra high in this one. Experimentation is an individual's eagerness to try new things. This whole stream is everything I do is experimental. I never know how I'm going to do something until I start doing it. If you want me to do a task, tell me what the task is, and then get out of my way and let me start playing around with it. And eventually I will figure out the best way for me to accomplish that task for you. High scores have a yearning for novelty and are easily bored by routine. Yep, yep. Low scores are more comfortable in familiar environments and tend to be skeptical of novelties. Low scores to me are like the people up here in Seattle. They're very comforted by process. They want to have a lot of guidelines and rules for doing things. And I've noticed when working with them, if you set them at a task and you don't give them that, they immediately go into anxiety and they start asking like, how do you want me to do this? Is there something I can read about how to do this? They want a process. And so people in this area can gain a lot of clout by creating these processes for other that they can give to other people. Like that's the form of leadership that they respect here, is people that can structure tasks for them and give them very specific detailed processes. Again, they're like robot computers. Intellectualism, degree of interest in abstract ideas. High scorers are fond of toying with ideas and thrill when they come across new and unconventional strands of thought. Low scorers tend to be indifferent to high-flying theoretical pursuits and more interested in facts and things. I was a philosophy minor because my school didn't have a major, but philosophy is my jam. I'm very interested in ideas. I study intellectual history, the history of ideas. How did the ideas we have today come to be in the first place? I am an idea geek, but at the same time, I like to ground those ideas in things that are practical and concrete. That's why I love talking about politics, because it gives me a way to take all this philosophical abstract stuff and examine it in specific, particular, concrete situations. So again, I think I have both of these traits. I have the high and the low score. So I'm going to put myself as very, very balanced here. And then the last one in openness is diversity tolerance. It's an individual's inclination to accommodate unconventional lifestyles and beliefs of others, as well as deviate from traditional norms themselves, the outliers. This is a high diversity tolerance space. High scores are accepting of different values and ways of living, even when those practices are opposed to their own. Low scores have greater respect for tradition and see great merit in the stability and sense of belonging that a set of shared values can create. I mean, I think I have that too. That's part of what forms of community, this sense of shared values. But I'm definitely high in, like growing up, I was the one that had the friends from all the different social groups. Like I had any group you can name it. I had some kind of friends. I was like we were the biggest collection of oddballs and misfits. No one would put all those people together in one group. And I've been told before, like all over and over and over in social situations where it's a group of people sitting around and they're like trying to figure out how they know each other. And it turns out I'm the common thread through all. They all know each other through me. Otherwise, they would probably never have met in their individual walks of life. So I'm kind of that node or that nexus for all, like for how people encounter a lot of. I'm usually people's first gay person they've ever met, first autistic person, first Satanist. I'm always putting myself in diverse environments that are different than my own. All right, thanks for sticking with me. We got one more to get through, and that is neuroticism. I don't think I'm that high in this to begin with, but I also don't think this is a big strength. So the personality facets I'm going to focus on the most are these first four. I mean the traits. First one's anxiety. High scores are get nervous and when they're faced with new situations. Low scores approach threatening situations more calmly and relaxed and are they don't like agonize. I think I'm very kind of low anxiety. In fact, the only time I really experience anxiety because of my empathy is when I'm around other people that are highly anxious. I start to catch their anxiety and I don't even know what I'm anxious about. And then I'll realize, oh, it's because this person around me is so anxious, they're making me anxious. I'm reacting to their anxiety with anxiety. I'm anxious about their anxiety. I'm anxious about why they're so scared and worked up when I'm not. So I'm very low in anxiety. Irritability. The individual's tendency to become angry and hostile with met with adversity. If adversity is trying to tell me how to talk or move or have an emotion or control me or micromanage me or take any kind of authority on me, then fuck yeah. High irritability. We're prone to feel slighted and react with resentment when confronted with bad news, where lower scores are less prone to anger and less severe in their outlook of life. I don't. The specific irritability I described, which is that trait reactance, I think I'm high in. But the way they describe the low scores, I think I'm fine with that. I handle bad news just fine. So I'm going to put a qualified high, but then mostly low. And moderation is how easily you yield to temptation if you struggle with drugs, alcohol, eating, candy, cigarettes, whatever. I don't have a naturally addictive personality. I think I'm pretty low in a moderation. People that are low find it easier to cope with delayed gratification and less prone to give in to temptation. Neuroticism's kind of reverse, where the high scores are negative and the low scores are the more desirable. Self-consciousness is your propensity to experience embarrassment and shame. I'm very low in I'm very hard to shame. Um, High scores are easily embarrassed and can be quickly made to feel uneasy or awkward. Low scores are less prone to feeling uncomfortable or letting inhibition get the better of them and are less affected by rejection and ridicule. I've had that my whole life. I hardly even feel it. It rolls right off of me. I'm so low in this. And then depressivity is your inclination to experience low moods, despondency, despair very, very rarely. And usually when I am experiencing it, there's a chemical. I can trace it to a chemical source. Either a medication I'm taking or alcohol or certain strains of weed or something. High scores can be easily beset by hopelessness and lacking the energy and drive to manage their activities. Low scores are disinclined to experience sadness or low moods. It's very rare that I get my little dips and slumps now and then, but they're rare. So I think I'm low in depressivity. And the last one is vulnerability, the inclination to be overwhelmed by uncertainty and feel powerless under pressure. High scores are easily stressed and may benefit greatly from peer support and predictable working conditions and environments. Low scores are characterized by resiliency and find it easy to keep cool and stay focused in the face of demanding situations. Wow. I'm pretty damn low in neuroticism. In fact, the only slightly high score of any of this is under irritability when people are trying to police me or micromanage me. Then I spike up. That's where you see those emotional spikes. Outside of that, I'm pretty even keel in all of this stuff. So, low neuroticism, which seems like it would be a strength, unless that one little irritability section is working against me, which is situational and contextual. Very, very high in openness, which seems like it would be a strength. But again, I've been in work environments where they told me I was like working at too high of a level and I was making it harder for everybody else, etc. So the wrong environment, it could be a negative. It's matching strength to environment, and I cannot figure out where the environments are to bring my strengths, to translate them into economic capital, where that like let cultural capital from being low class, like kunas, whatever, doesn't work against me. So it seems like you can have like 50 or 60 strengths and 2 weaknesses, and those 2 weaknesses will lock you out of opportunities despite all of the strengths you bring to offer. And that has been my experience, and that is also the argument in a way that I think the woke are trying to make in their very weird, bizarre, Marxist, postmodern, nonsensical way. If they would frame it in a more realistic way like I'm doing, I might actually be able to get on board with some of their agenda. Um, I'm very high in the parts of conscientiousness that seem to me like would be valued. I'm confident in my ability to get things done. I have a very, very high commitment. I'm loyal. If I say I'm going to do it, you can count on me to do it. I'm reliable. I'm achievement striving. Um, the things I'm low in don't seem to me to be that, don't seem to counterbalance the strengths very much. Like, who cares if I don't work well under structure? I compensate for it by working really well outside of structure in this spontaneous experimental way. So to me, why doesn't that outweigh the low structure? The self-discipline, I'm able to be disciplined when I need to. It's just not my natural tendency. And I can be deliberate when I need to. It's just not my natural tendency. So again, I just have a different like work style than people with a more systematic, structured approach, but I still bring all of the strengths of conscientiousness. Agreeableness, I'm way higher than this than I realized I was. Trust, earnestness, like ability to be transparent and not deceptive. Concern for others, wanting to help others. The areas I'm low in really are I don't avoid confrontation easily. Like if I'm being asked to compromise myself, I'm very collaborative. I work very well collaboratively as long as it's not interfering with my ability to be myself, my autonomy. That's where the conflict comes in, and that maps with that irritability conflict. So my weaknesses are very, very specific, if they even are weaknesses. I think being yourself is a strength. And to me, I don't know why environments find those so hard to accommodate, because you get for me, for your buck, you get way more strength than you do weakness. So it's like that those few little things, people are willing to forego all the strength that they would get from me just because of those few little things. And that's the thing that I don't understand. I don't want to explore in future streams. And then extroversion, super, super high end. Positive emotions, excitement seeking, my activity level. I can work. I'm like nuclear powered. I can do the work of like 3 or 4 people. That's a fucking strength. Like, you can't overlook the defects to get that level of effectiveness. Come on, what's wrong with you people? Assertiveness, my ability to socialize and interface with different people, the gregariousness and the warmth. Okay, I'm glad I ran this experiment. I know it went longer than I expected. I learned a lot from it. I'm going to kind of take my notes and work it up into some kind of little chart or tool that can help me like home in better on what I need to overcome to translate my social and cultural capital into economic capital. Because if I can figure out how to help myself, I can figure out how to help other people do it. And then I think a lot of it basically comes down to, and this is what I've said forever, is just finding the right environments. In the autism community, it's called niche building. Finding the environments where you don't have to mask, you don't have to change, you naturally fit. And that's really all it is. I'm just surprised, I guess, at how little of these environments there are out there. Like, I'm trying to build one on this stream, and even in YouTube, there's very few panels that are doing like creating similar environments like I'm creating. I think Moose does a good job on his channel. I think Blizzy at the Blind Spot does a good job on his channel. Those are the two off the top of my head that that come. So maybe despite all of the strengths, because of the liability, maybe they're so out of step with like mainstream society that they're enough of a liability to outweigh all of those strengths to the sense that to the extent that the environments that exist for us are just not out there. We have to build them ourselves. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. So this is what's going to happen. Oh my God, not lost. Thank you so much. I hadn't even looked at comments yet. Thank you, not lost. I'm going to do a Halloween goal too for the Halloween party. We can do several goals throughout the day. So if you can think of some cool Halloween tasks and goals, we can work some of those into Super Chat goals. So I'm going to go over comments real quick. I'm going to end the stream. I'm going to restart a new stream. And then we're going to start our Halloween party. All right, let's see who showed up. Hopefully my mods took care of any trolls that were here. Okay. Yes, Kitty, thank you so much. Everything Kitty's saying here, it really helps the stream. Kane, thank you. Oh, this is brilliant. Well, oh yeah, last night Easy reviewed my, it's on his channel. He reviewed my debate from a year and a half ago with Andrew Wilson on gay marriage. And most of the chat, of course, was very sympathetic to Andrew. But that you call it standing my ground. And I call it logic. Like I went in there, I made very specific arguments. I gave the reasons for them. I didn't deviate from any of it because I can't capitulate to stupidity. I don't know how to pretend like 2 plus 2 is 5. So if that was standing my ground, it was just very easy to do. Because most of it is people not hearing a word I was saying and attacking some straw man argument over and over and over that I never made. And it happened in Andrew's debate, and it happened on Easy's panel last night and in his chat. They were all doing the same thing. Andrew, Easy, and his audience were all responding to arguments and claims that I never made. And none of them were focusing on what I was actually saying. And they kept accusing me of doing that to Andrew, but every time I asked Andrew to try to tell me what his argument was, he would never answer the question and give me the information. He said that gay marriage harms Christians, and he would never say what that specific harm was. So, again, it was very easy to stand my ground. Hey, Tommy D, I hope you show up for the party. Peace, love, you too. Crabs in a bucket. Okay, let's see. Oh, Ladybug. Yeah, see, I find plenty of people that get it. None of them, I guess it's that, what is it, the type of capital, that linked capital, where it's linking to institutions or people in positions of power or influence. None of them are linking capital. So I need to find the people like you guys that have some of that linking capital. I think that is going to be the link to this economic capital. And that's what Joe and I are trying to build here with the Nexus. Samsonite, how did you get off a ban? This Samsonite guy is supposed to be on ban. So if he comes up, he was somebody that tried to fool me one time into making me think he wanted to be part of this community. I actually gave him a wrench. And he was one of the moderators, and he wanted to help build this community. And then I found him on some other streams, like yucking it up with the trolls and saying the complete opposite, and really just distorting everything I was trying to do here. So I don't trust him one single bit. No, I just said you were an authoritarian fuck, because you kept telling me what issues should be important to me or not, instead of letting me decide that for myself. Oh, hey, Bex. Survivor was interesting last night. There was a lot of interesting gameplay. Ricardo, good to see you. Yeah, see, not laws, we do agree here and there. He's just being a troll. He comes from one of the troll group. There's a drama community with a bunch of trolls, and sometimes they try to like jump the fence and come in here and dust up trouble when they can. Excellent, Ricardo. I think that's a good thing for a lot of people to do. A lot of it, not laws, is just is observation and pattern recognition. And then also understanding your own self and using that as a basis to figure out the theory of mind of others. Right. And Kitty, you're new to the stream, but I've done stream after stream of the bodies are piled this high of people that have tried to come on here and tell me to calm down, and they get kicked instantly. Like just yeah, it's like a rubber band just yanks them right out the minute they say it. This is an emotion positive space, and nobody's allowed to come here and police anybody else's emotions, including mine. Especially men policing the emotions of other men. I think men getting in touch with their emotions is something they struggle with, and I want to provide a space where that can happen. And so people that come here and try to micromanage other people's emotions are very much not welcomed here. They're going to get removed from the panel probably that day or that stream, but they can come back later if they stop doing it. And Kitty brought donuts. Oh, buzz people, right? Yeah. I had a girl one time. Me and a friend were tripping on acid, and we were in his apartment. It was like I don't know, midnight or something, late night, and we were passionately talking philosophy. And we had like diagrams. We were drawing shit out and mapping out the universe on the carpet and all kind of stuff. And his girlfriend was in the corner, just kind of quiet, and she was tripping too, but she was just kind of quiet, and we thought she was like trying to sleep or something. She wasn't into philosophy. And at some point, the girl, she was like on this little mattress in the corner. She jumps off of the mattress and she starts screaming, "Oh my God, stop it, I can't take this anymore, I can't take it." And she runs out of the apartment screaming. Like our philosophy triggered her that badly. Just out of the blue, she started screaming at us. She had reached her limit of philosophical energy. Actually, I would argue against even the benefits of being calm, because what I find mostly is the benefit is to the other person. It's to the person that wants you to calm down. They're not concerned about what you're getting out of having the emotion. They're concerned about having their own emotion be made better. So if you're truly if your concern is truly for me, I don't need to be calmed down. I can manage that for myself. Just let me be whatever I'm being. That's the best way you can provide any benefit to me, if that's what you're. Usually, the concern is for themselves or the group. It's a form of virtue signaling or like showing other people. I don't know, because we don't come from I don't come from a culture where they even calm people down. So I don't know why people go around policing every people, but it seems to be like it's like a form of leadership, I guess. They're signaling to the rest of the group that they can master this situation for them or something. And again, we looked at that. What trait was it with the emotionality and the openness? People that are high in emotion and low in emotion, and people that are high in emotion are more expressive, and people that are low see less of a value. They see emotional expression as a liability, and people that are high in passion and emotionality see it as a strength. And so when you're calming me down, you're interfering with my passion, which is a strength. And it tells me two things: you don't know me, and you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to handle people with passion. You don't know how to distinguish passion from, I guess, more socially destructive emotions, whatever those are. And you don't know how to intervene in an emotion in a way that's going to actually help the person. All right, let's see. Right, I just call it as passion. All right, Lord Bach is in here trolling, so I'm going to put him in time. Or you can do the honors if you want. You could put him in timeout, and then if he keeps balking, we can I don't have donuts. I don't even eat donuts, but people can bring them for the party. We're gonna get that started right now, in fact. So thank you for being patient. Part of this live stream, it's mostly an open panel, but part of it is a journal for me to get my thoughts out. And I had all this built up in my brain since yesterday, and I was reading websites this morning and everything. And I wanted to get it all out. I knew it was probably going to take a while, but I'm glad that I got it on stream. Now I can go back to it and refer to it and learn from it and like work it up into something useful. I want to make some chart or diagram of it. So now I'm going to end the stream. Give me 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to start a new stream, and we're going to do an all-day Halloween party. I'll keep this new stream going into the evening, or as long as you want it going. Thank you for coming, those of you that showed up and stuck around, and I'm going to see you again in about 10 minutes. So thanks a lot, everybody. See you soon. Happy Halloween. Here we go. Happy Halloween.